They hid the truth right before our eyes for centuries, and now what's about to be revealed will shake everything you believe in, and maybe even your salvation. What stood on Peter's bones may not be the house of God, but the throne of another Lord. Yes, Satan's own throne. And the worst, it is no longer just in Rome. It has expanded, crossed the ocean, taken root in America, and is about to consolidate the greatest spiritual deception in human history. You will realize that the columns of the Vatican do not support just one faith. They sustain a symbolic empire made of gold, architecture, and emotional manipulation. And each stained glass window that shines with the sunlight does not illuminate the soul, but it blinds the spirit. What you will see here is not theory, it is a reality carefully disguised as religion. Distorted cherubim, mitres of pagan gods, auditoriums in the shape of a snake, the throne, the keys, the garments, everything connects. Everything is designed to keep you in, but away from God. Maybe you feel afraid, perhaps revolt. Maybe your heart tightens as if something is falling apart inside you, and it is. It's the shell, the facade, the lie. But in this collapse, there is also liberation. Because when the darkness is revealed, the true light can finally shine. Faith in Christ needs no palaces, no tiaras, no occult symbols. It needs open eyes, a sincere heart, and the courage to say, enough. Then take a deep breath. Strengthen yourself, because what you hear next may shake your foundations, but it can also be the beginning of your spiritual liberation. If you feel like something in this world is out of place, it's because it is. And now you will understand why. It's not just wood wrapped in bronze and gold. When a person steps inside St. Peter's Basilica and contemplates that monumental throne, he is not just in front of a liturgical object. He is being swallowed up by an architectural narrative constructed to cause astonishment. Pedro, the humble fisherman, became a symbol of something he would never have accepted in life. Absolute power, centralized on a throne that does not even have a proven archaeological connection with its existence. Curious, isn't it? Even the Vatican itself admits that the chair was assembled centuries later, and yet thousands kneel before it as if it were the very echo of God's voice. Just look at the staging. 4 doctors of the church supporting the chair. John Chrysostom, Athanasius, Ambrose, and Augustine. 4 human pillars raising a throne of authority, not faith. The symbolism here is stark. It is as if to say, doctrine holds you back, history pressures you, and you accept it without question. Architecture swallows you up while lights and angles make you feel small, submissive. A perfect scenario for those who want to install control in the soul without the body noticing. This throne does not communicate with the Christ of the tree, but with the Christ of the stage. The play is theatrical, but the audience does not understand the script. When a believer enters there, the brain feels more than it understands. It feels reverence, it feels weight, it feels submission. It is psychological engineering, like a good illusionism. The trick? Hide a worn wooden seat and elevate your image with the glow of bronze. It's like selling an old Fiat inside the body. Of a Ferrari, the authority of the Vatican here is not discussed, it is carved. And when something is enthroned in marble, it becomes true for those who don't have the tools to deconstruct it. Peter's name becomes a seal. Architecture becomes command. And the throne, the throne. He was not made for Christ to sit, but to keep you on your knees. And when you look up to see what else is there, what you discover can lead you to a new amazement. You shall not make for yourself a graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above. Exodus 24. This commandment seems to have been forgotten when we look at the central stained glass window of St. Peter's Basilica. The dove, which represents the Holy Spirit, is surrounded by a halo of golden light in the shape of a sun. a clear allusion to ancient solar cults such as that of Mithras and Heliopolis. Architecture screams power disguised as faith, and genuine spirituality is buried by layers of recycled and repackaged pagan symbolism. Whoever observes with attentive eyes realizes that Pedro is in the background. The sun, the light, and the throne take the lead. It's as if the Vatican's spiritual designers have taken an advanced course in esoteric advertising. They took symbols from ancient cults, changed the names, and presented them as Christianity. The stained glass window, for example, is the same solar disk that surrounded the throne of Mithras. Coincidence? No, it is symbolic control. And the worst, all this works. The average believer, enveloped in the beauty and grandeur of the environment, hardly questions whether he is in a Christian temple or in an esoteric reliquary of occult power. The distorted cherubim, with almost psychedelic features, do not evoke biblical angels, but entities of the subconscious. They look more like figures from a visionary ritual than messengers from God. And this is exactly the intention. Architecture and iconography were not designed to clarify, but to confuse. It is like putting perfume on poison. The smell attracts you, but the contents numb your soul. And in the middle of it all, the throne shines in the background, like a sun that never goes out. It is curious to think that Paul, the apostle of dense letters, would never have endorsed a faith so dependent on images and symbols borrowed from pagan rituals. He himself warned about this in 1 Corinthians 10:14. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. But here, idolatry wears golden robes and sits on stained glass domes. And the next step in this architectural theatricality goes beyond solar symbolism. It stirs your own subconscious. There's a reason why you feel so small when you enter St. Peter's Basilica. It's not just the height of the ceiling, nor the shine of the gold. It's the way everything is designed to master your senses: light, scale, rhythm, and symmetry. Bernini, the architect of the throne, was not only an artist, he was a psychological strategist. Architecture does not elevate the spirit, it subjugates. It's like being inside a mind that wants to convince you of something without saying a word. Imagine a throne room where every detail tells you, here you obey. The circular speakers, the windows filtering light at perfect angles, the muffled sound that echoes without aggressiveness. Everything there speaks to the soul, but in subtle, almost hypnotic ways. And who sits in the center? A throne of authority. But who reigns? Christ, or the image of a power that has installed itself in its name? The whole place functions as a ritual theater where the faithful participate without realizing that they are only a spectator, or perhaps the target. There is a deep connection between what you see and what you feel. It is the same kind of manipulation used in great empires and totalitarian regimes, architecture for domination. And the most subtle thing about all this is that power hides in beauty. Just as Peter's throne tries to convey faith through its grandeur, it actually communicates control, visual, emotional, and spiritual. Pedro gets lost in the scenery. The Vatican takes center stage in the narrative, and the viewer conditioned. Curious how Revelation 2:13 mentions the throne of Satan, located where the dwelling place of Satan is. The biblical description fits more than one scenario, but the parallel with centralized ritualistic power structures is inevitable. The believer enters seeking God, but leaves conditioned to obey the system, and this system, at every step, leads you to a new layer of symbols, including those that say where Peter was buried, or supposedly it was. Many people repeat without thinking that Peter was buried just below the altar of St. Peter's Basilica. It's a beautiful, symbolic, convenient phrase, but is it true? The excavations carried out by the Vatican itself in the 1940s revealed something uncomfortable. a pagan necropolis full of tombs and monuments that existed long before Christianity even emerged. The bones that they attributed to Peter, they were found far from the original tomb, inside a box with purple cloth and gold thread. A plot worthy of a movie, and very lucrative for the authority that signs it. If it were a serious scientific process, we would have carbon dating, solid archaeological evidence, cross-evidence, but the Vatican preferred to preserve the narrative. Why? Because this story strengthens the throne. It is as if to say, Peter is here, therefore our power is legitimate. Peter, who walked in sandals in the dust of Galilee, became a marble argument, and the less you question, the more solid it seems. It is the old trick of power to turn doubt into dogma. There is a subtle spiritual engineering play here. By affirming that the apostle is buried there, a symbolic point of convergence is created. The basilica is no longer just a building. It is a gravitational center of authority, validated by a body, or by a carefully constructed history about that body. What if someone dares to doubt it? Just remember that the entire structure around it was already designed to crush any critical resistance, literally from top to bottom. Jesus never asked them to build a temple on top of the bones of his followers, and Peter, as reported in Acts 10:26, refused worship, saying, "Arise, I am also a man." But within the Vatican's architectural narrative, Peter is more than a man. He is a stone, he is a grave, he is a throne, and it is on top of it that rests not only an altar, but an entire system of power. From then on, even the symbol of the keys gains another weight. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 16:19. This phrase was transformed into a coat of arms, crown, and instrument of dominion. The Vatican uses it as if it were an official document signed by Jesus, granting absolute power to whoever occupies the throne of Peter. But the text, out of context, becomes a pretext. The two crossed keys, one gold and one silver, are not just art. They represent dual control, spiritual and earthly. And the red cord that unites them? A symbolic bond of ritualistic authority that instead of liberating, imprisons. The curious thing is that these keys refer to much older traditions. Babylonian priests used similar symbols to open and close spiritual portals. Did Jesus really want to install a system of divine security in the shape of a coat of arms? Or could it be that once again the symbolism was recycled, renamed, and redesigned? The key ceases to be an invitation to faith and becomes a mechanism of control. Who enters, who stays out, and who decides all of this? Today, when one sees the papal coat of arms stamped on documents, altars, and ceremonial vestments, the message is clear. We have access. The idea of salvation becomes a privilege of a few, and the heavenly door gains an institutional lock. Pedro, the fisherman, becomes a doorman, but a doorman who, ironically, may never have received such keys, literally. And then the strength of architecture and narrative comes in again. Together, they reinforce this power as if it were divine. It's no coincidence that Paul, one of the leading scholars, talked so much about God-established authority, Romans 13:1, reinforcing the idea that to question the system would be, in effect, to question the Creator himself. But whoever controls, the symbol controls the message, and the keys are not the end. They are the beginning of a more complex symbolic garment, a ritualistic arsenal disguised as faith. It's not just clothes. The ceremonial robes of the clergy carry a silent language that screams authority. The papal tiara, for example, with its 3 crowns, does not just represent beauty or tradition. It symbolizes dominion over heaven, earth, and the underworld. Does it seem exaggerated? Perhaps. But when you understand the pagan symbolism behind it, everything changes color. It is the same concept used by ancient emperors, Chaldean magicians, and fertility cult priests. Peter's throne, in this scenario, becomes a catwalk of control. The mitre, that shell-shaped hat, originates from the fish god Dagon, a cult figure among the Philistines. What was a pagan symbol of fertility was transformed into an accessory of spiritual authority. And therein lies the trick. When something is repeated for centuries and clothed in reverence, no one questions it anymore. People see it and accept it. But what if the same mitre was on the head of an Aztec shaman or an Egyptian priest? The interpretation would be completely different. What changes is the context, not the symbol. Another curious example is the zucchetto, or skull cap, that small cap that covers the top of the head of the cardinals and the Pope. Some say that it seals the crown chakra, blocking the direct connection with the divine. It may sound esoteric, but it makes sense within a system that centralizes spiritual power in a single figure. Instead of encouraging the direct connection between the person and God, a filter, a hierarchy is created. Pedro again becomes a symbol, not of faith, but of distancing. And behind all this, the architecture reinforces the costume. The stained glass windows illuminate the robes, the gold glitters under the dome, the throne in the background makes the ceremony a visual spectacle. It is as if faith became theater and the believer a captive audience. Paul, with his emphasis on order and submission, is also evoked as a justification for maintaining this structure. But the question that begins to form is, what if this whole outfit is just the costume of a larger character designed to cover up a much deeper engineering? Paul never knew Jesus personally, but it was from him that we inherited much of what is now considered Christian doctrine. Strange, right? While Peter walked with Christ through the dusty streets, Paul wrote letters filled with instructions that fit perfectly with Roman imperial logic. He spoke of sin, submission, salvation by faith, themes that, curiously, pave the way for a religion centered on authority rather than spiritual freedom. And those who read carefully notice that his message favored control. Peter spoke to the people, Paulo wrote for the structure. It is he who says that all authority is instituted by God, Romans 13:1, a phrase used to this day to justify religious and political power. Now imagine that added to Peter's throne, the solar-stained glass windows, the crossed keys, and the ceremonial robes. Everything takes on a new meaning. Paul, in this game, is not just an apostle, he is the architect of institutionalized faith, a doctrinaire engineer who designed the foundations of a strong, rigid, and highly manipulable. It is interesting to note that the Gnostic currents of the time vehemently rejected Paul. They considered him a false apostle, someone who distorted the original teaching of Jesus to adapt it to a model suitable for the empire. And the most curious thing, Jesus never mentioned him. No direct mention, no dialogue, and yet Paul's name shines brighter than Peter's on many altars. Its power is in words, words that, written with precision, have shaped centuries of thought and submission, and the Vatican, with its imposing architecture, only stages the script that Paul began. It is as if every detail, the throne, the coat of arms, the clothing, were the materialization of his letters. The symbolism, the control, the hierarchy, everything is there. And when you look at the building as a whole, the inevitable question arises. Is this really all about Christ, or about something much bigger, much older, which found in the figure of Peter and Paul the ideal stage? The Vatican is small in size but gigantic in influence. A city-state of less than 1 square kilometer that holds a spiritual and political power that crosses borders. And all of this was built on layers, not just of stone, but of ancient cultures, forgotten symbols, and repurposed beliefs. The Egyptian obelisk that stands in the center of St. Peter's Square was not placed there by chance. It comes straight from Heliopolis, the center of solar worship in Egypt. The one who represents a pagan sun god now reigns silently among Peter's faithful. And get this, Around the obelisk, Bernini's colonnade forms a ritual containment field. Every detail was designed to visually, emotionally, and spiritually align the individual to the center, the throne. The golden dome of the basilica shines like an architectural sun, reflecting the sky and imposing a symbolic weight. It is not faith that manifests itself there, it is visual programming. Peter is in the name, but the true power is manifested in the forms, the materials, and the symbolism that echoes practices long before Christianity. The Vatican coat of arms, the cross over the globe, the three crowns, the stained glass windows, the geometric lines, everything screams a spiritual engineering that acts as an invisible engine. It is like a large board where the pieces are precisely positioned to conduct not only devotion, but also submission. The Vatican, in this scenario, is not just a church. It is a seat of command. Peter is the face, the structure, the body, and the spirit that dwells there. This is a question that only those who see beyond the surface dare to ask. Paul, Peter, architecture, throne, symbolism, control. It all fits together like gears in a very finely tuned machine. And when the viewer believes that he has reached the center of the truth, he discovers that he is still inside the scenario. And it is there, in the hall where there should be resurrection and hope, that a new image emerges, an image that bears reptilian traces and a Christ that few dare to recognize. Inside the Paul VI Auditorium in the Vatican is one of the most disturbing sculptures in the Christian world, the Resurrection, by Pericles Fazzini. At first glance, it would be Christ emerging from an apocalyptic scenario. But just look closely. The wavy shapes, the narrow eyes, the scaly texture. The Christ portrayed there has reptilian features, almost like a serpent in the midst of chaos. For many, this goes unnoticed. But those who analyze it in depth realize that this is not random art. It is symbolic language, and symbolic language, when it comes to religious architecture, is always intentional. The entire building collaborates with this narrative. Seen from above, the auditorium has the clear shape of a serpent's head. The curved, stained glass windows resemble eyes, and the stage, the open mouth. Yes, the believer enters through the symbolic belly of a predator, and when he sits down to listen to speeches, sermons, and instructions, he is literally inside the symbolic structure of a serpent. This is where architecture and visual control come together to not only impress, but condition. Pedro is absent, Paolo silent. Only the scenario remains. The reptilian symbology did not emerge yesterday. Since Genesis, the serpent represents deception, manipulation, and the desire for power. And it is not by chance that this symbol reappears in the heart of the Catholic See. It is as if the biblical narrative has been reversed. Now, the serpent wears a tunic and sits on carved thrones. If Peter had seen this, he would certainly have torn his garments. And if Paul had walked into that audience, perhaps he would have rewritten each letter more urgently. And the most disturbing thing, all of this is public, visible, recorded, but few dare to interpret it. Most see but do not see. He believes but does not question. And the cycle continues, within a structure where each symbol does not point to Christ crucified, but to another throne. Older, more disguised, deeper. A throne that seems to have found an echo. From the Vatican to America, it's time to stop and ask yourself, how long are you going to let your faith be built on a foundation you've never questioned? How many other truths are hidden behind? Colorful stained glass windows, soft words and rituals that seem sacred, but do they carry centuries of symbolic control? What seemed shocking to you in this video is not fiction. It is the spirit world operating before our eyes, camouflaged, rehearsed, and very well funded. Now that you know, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to keep pretending that it's just an exaggeration? Are you going to ignore the symbols, the structures, the signs? Or will he seek for himself the truth? the one that liberates. For Christ does not hide himself in golden thrones or serpent-shaped auditoriums. He is close to those who have open eyes and willing hearts. Perhaps today is your turning point. Maybe now, while many sleep, you awaken. So tell me, what else do you see now that used to go unnoticed? Which of these revelations shook you the most? Write in the comments. Let's deepen this awakening together. Your question may be someone's answer. Your voice matters. And if this content spoke to you, if it woke you up, if it shook you up, then subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and share it with those who need to. Wake up, because this is not just a video, it's a mission.